Formula One is a sport where the smallest errors can have massive consequences. Over the years, we've seen numerous mistakes that have changed the course of races, championships, and even careers. Today, we're looking at some of these pivotal moments, from on-track errors to strategic missteps and management decisions gone wrong. It's late in the 2007 season, and rookie sensation Lewis Hamilton is on the verge of making history. With just 2 races to go, he's leading the championship by 12 points over his teammate Fernando Alonso and 17 points ahead of Ferrari's Kimi Räikkönen. There are only 20 points left up for grabs, so things are looking pretty good for the young Brit. Hamilton arrives in China and absolutely nails it in qualifying, taking pole position. Race day arrives and it's a bit damp out there. Hamilton gets a great start and comfortably leads the first stint, but after the pit stops, Räikkönen starts to close in. Both Ferrari and McLaren had left their worn intermediate tyres on, not wanting to risk putting on new ones with the track drying out. But then the weather decides to spice things up even more. Another shower falls and suddenly Räikkönen's slightly less worn tyres give him an advantage. He manages to sneak past Hamilton and take the lead. As the rain stops again, most drivers switch to slicks, but not Hamilton. McLaren keeps him out there, and this is where things start to go wrong. Hamilton's tyres are fading fast, but the team is worried about pitting him too early. They're keeping an eye on Alonso, who has still some life left in his intermediates and is closing the gap. McLaren keeps Hamilton out there, lap after lap. His tyres are so warm that you can actually see a white band of canvas on the rear tyres. It's like he's driving on ice at this point. Finally, McLaren calls Hamilton in for a pit stop, but it's too late. With basically no tread left on his tyres, as he tries to enter the pit lane, his car just slides right off the track and into the gravel trap. Hamilton was left watching in disbelief, knowing that a championship he had almost clinched was now slipping through his fingers. Räikkönen goes on to win the race, with Alonso finishing second. And just like that, what seemed like a done deal for Hamilton turns into a 3-way title fight heading into the final race in Brazil. Talk about a roller coaster of emotions. This race had it all: drama, strategy, mistakes, and a rookie's dream season hanging by a thread. It just goes to show that in F1, it's never over until that checkered flag waves. And in Brazil, the drama continued. Hamilton's race was plagued by more issues, and in a stunning turn of events, Räikkönen clinched the championship by a single point, leaving Hamilton to wonder what might have been if things had gone differently in China.
Into the pits anyway comes Lewis Hamilton. He goes straight on into the gravel trap. Can he keep the wheels spinning? Can he get some momentum going? No, he can't. It's all going to get away from him.
While Hamilton's mistake cost him a shot at the title, other drivers, like Stirling Moss, made decisions that were as noble as they were costly. It's August 24th, 1958, and we're in Porto, Portugal. The circuit? Well, calling it a circuit is being generous. This track was more like a death trap on wheels. We're talking cobblestones, curbs, tram lines, lampposts, trees, and drains scattered all over the place. It was so tough that even the drivers were shocked, but they raced anyway, because that's just how they rolled back then. The start-finish straight was on the harbour, feeding into a dual carriageway with a tramway running down the middle. Then it swung left onto a cobblestone road before diving between houses and shops. It was like racing through a medieval town centre at 150 miles per hour. Stirling Moss in his dark green van wall, sitting in pole position. Right next to him is his rival and fellow Brit, Mike Hawthorn, in a Ferrari. These two are battling it out to become the first British F1 world champion. The tension is high, and 120,000 spectators have shown up to watch the drama unfold. The race kicks off, and it's a real back and forth between Moss and Hawthorn. But halfway through, Moss takes control. He's leading by almost a minute. Hawthorn, meanwhile, is having brake troubles, but manages to set the fastest lap and climb back to second place. Now, here's where things get interesting. Moss is so far ahead that he laps Hawthorn, but being the gentleman he is, Moss decides to let Hawthorn unlap himself on the final lap. Little did Moss know this act of sportsmanship was about to turn into one of the biggest mistakes in F1 history. As Moss crosses the finish line to win the race, he comes across Hawthorn's Ferrari, spun out and stalled in an escape road. Now, most drivers would just cruise on by. job done, but not Moss. He actually stops and waits to see if Hawthorn needs help. Hawthorn manages to push start his car and finish the race in second. But here's the kicker. Race officials protest, claiming Hawthorn restarted his car while going the wrong way on the track. That's a big no-no, punishable by disqualification. Now remember, Hawthorn is Moss's main rival for the championship. If he gets disqualified, Moss's path to the title gets a whole lot easier. But what does Moss do? He steps up and defends Hawthorn, telling the officials that Hawthorn was actually on the footpath, not the track, when he restarted. Thanks to Moss's testimony, Hawthorn keeps his second place and the points that go with it. And guess what? 2 races later, Hawthorn wins the championship by just 1 point over Moss. This moment showed that for some, sportsmanship trumps even the allure of a world championship. It's a testament to Moss's character and a reminder of the gentlemanly spirit that once defined Formula One. In 2004, Jaguar's F team was having a tough time. They weren't doing great on the track, and Ford, who owned them, was getting tired of pouring money into the team. Jaguar knew they needed some publicity fast. Their solution? They decided to put an actual diamond on the nose of their car for the Monaco Grand Prix. Not just any diamond, we're talking about a stone worth $250,000. It was part of a promotion for the movie Ocean's 12, which was coming out that year. On race day, their driver, Christian Klein, started in 14th place. But just a few corners into the race, he crashed at the Lowe's hairpin. When they recovered the car, the diamond was gone. Nobody ever found it. There were all sorts of theories about what happened. Maybe it fell off before the crash and got swept up with the debris. Some people thought a spectator might have grabbed it. There were even jokes about it being an actual heist, given the Ocean's 12 connection. The funny thing is, Jaguar had actually put diamonds on both their cars and had spares in the garage, but it was the one on the crash car that went missing. In the end, Jaguar got the publicity they wanted, but it didn't save the team. Ford sold them to Red Bull at the end of the year. As for the diamond, well, it's probably still out there somewhere in Monaco. Who knows, maybe it'll turn up one day. But on the same note, Ford aren't the only one with huge Monaco mistakes to their name. It's Saturday qualifying in Monaco 1988. Senna's in his McLaren and he's about to set a lap that people still talk about today. He was in a zone, completely focused. When he finished his lap, he was 1.4 seconds faster than anyone else. In Monaco, that's not just quick, it's on another planet. Now fast forward to Sunday, Senna's leading the race and he looks unstoppable. For 67 laps, he's in complete control. It seems like he's cruising to his second straight win in Monaco. But then, on lap 67, it all goes wrong at the Portier corner. What exactly happened? Well, that's where things get interesting. Even within the McLaren team, there are different theories about what went down. Some say he just understeered and went straight into the barrier. Simple as that. Other things, he clipped the inside barrier, which messed up his front wing and sent him into the outside wall. And then there's the theory that he had a slow puncture. Let's break it down. If you look at the crash site, you can see 2 black rubber marks going straight into the barrier. That doesn't look like understeer. If he was understeering, you'd expect to see marks of him trying to turn the car, so we can probably rule that one out. The slow puncture theory is interesting, but it's hard to say if it was the cause of the crash or a result of it. Photos after the crash do show his left rear tyre was deflated, but that could have happened on impact. The theory that seems most likely is that Senna clipped the inside barrier. This lines up with photos showing his front wing was a bit bent after the crash. The idea is that hitting the inside barrier threw off his steering and he couldn't correct it in time. He had just enough time to hit the brakes. That's what left those black marks before he hit the outside wall. Whether it was a puncture, a barrier clip, or just a rare lapse in concentration, the crash cost Senna what would have been a certain win. It was a reminder that even the greatest drivers can make mistakes, and in Monaco, those mistakes are usually costly. Even Senna himself looked rather shocked when he stepped out of the car down by the seafront. According to reports, he didn't even head back to the pit lane and simply left the circuit and walked back to his apartment. 30 years on, this race is still talked about. It's part of what makes Senna such a legendary figure in F1. The mystery around the crash only adds to his mystique. In a way, not knowing exactly what happened that day just makes the Senna legend even greater.
Ayrton Senna has hit the wall. Ayrton Senna is out of his car and out of this race.
Ayrton Senna goes out of the lead of the Monaco Grand Prix.
Absolutely incredible. I relax and I open windows for mistakes.
Let's talk about one of the most gut-wrenching moments in recent F1 history, Daniel Ricciardo's pit stop disaster at the 2016 Monaco Grand Prix. This race had everything: wet conditions, strategy calls, and a massive communication error that cost Ricciardo a near certain victory. So the race is on a wet day in Monaco, with Ricciardo starting from pole. He gets off to a great start, pulling away from the Mercedes of Nico Rosberg, who's struggling for pace. Ricciardo's looking dominant, building up a 13-second lead. It's looking good for the Aussie. As the track starts to dry, teams start thinking about tyre strategy. Red Bull decided to pit Ricciardo for intermediate tyres. It seems like a smart move at the time, but it put him behind Lewis Hamilton, who stayed out on wet tyres. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Hamilton pits for ultra soft slicks, and Red Bull see their chance. They call Ricciardo in, planning to put him on super softs. The idea is that these tyres would last longer if they came out behind Hamilton. Smart thinking, right? Wrong. When Ricciardo pulls into the pits, his tyres aren't ready. The team is scrambling, and Ricciardo's just sitting there, watching precious seconds tick away. It turns out there was a miscommunication between the pit wall and the garage. The right tyres were at the back of the garage, and they couldn't get them to the car in time. The pit stop took about 10 seconds longer than it should have. When Ricciardo finally exits the pit, he finds himself side by side with Hamilton. For the rest of the race, Ricciardo threw everything he had at Hamilton. Each lap was a desperate attempt to undo the pit stop disaster. But Monaco is unforgiving, and despite coming tantalizingly close at the chicane, the wind slipped through his fingers. After the race, the pain in Ricciardo's voice was unmistakable. "Save it," he told his team on the cool-down lap. "There's nothing you guys can say that will make it any better." On the podium, his usual radiant smile was replaced by a look of utter devastation. This wasn't just a lost race, it was a dream shattered. This heart-wrenching moment became a turning point in Ricciardo's career. The trust between driver and team, so crucial in F1, had been severely tested. It was one of the key moments that would eventually lead to his surprising departure from Red Bull, showing how a single pit stop error could not only cost a race win, but potentially alter the course of a driver's career. As Ricciardo left Monaco that day, the weight of what could have been hung heavy on his shoulders.
They haven't got the tyres ready. The tyres aren't ready.
And speaking of former Red Bull drivers and mistakes, our next driver knew them all too well. In Adelaide in 1995, Coulthard's having a great weekend. He qualified second, right behind his Williams teammate Damon Hill. When the lights went out, he got a brilliant start and took the lead. He was looking good, trading fastest laps with Hill, and it seems like it might be his day. Then comes lap 20. Coulthard heads into the pits for his first pit stop. Now, Adelaide's pit entry was tricky, a tight right-hander that caught out a few drivers that day. But Coulthard, he was leading the race. Surely he'd be fine, right? Wrong. As he turns into the pit lane, he locks up and boom, straight into the wall. Just like that, the race leader is out. After the race, Coulthard was understandably embarrassed. He said, "I feel like a right idiot." Fair enough. After all, we've all had those moments, just maybe not while leading a Grand Prix. There was some talk about the engine maybe defaulting to idle mode, catching him by surprise. But regardless of the reason, it was a tough pill to swallow.
And into the pit lane. Oh, my goodness. David Coulthard smashes himself out of the Australian. I have never seen that before.
The kicker? This was Coulthard's last race for Williams before moving to McLaren. Talk about leaving on a low note. It's worth noting that Coulthard wasn't the only one struggling with that pit entry that day. Andrea Montemini spun at the final hairpin earlier in the race. Roberto Moreno also spun coming into the pit lane, hitting the wall with the rear of his car. Despite the embarrassing crash, Coulthard bounced back and went on to have a highly successful career, proving that even the best drivers learn from their mistakes. It's a testament to his resilience and ability to overcome setbacks, traits that would serve him well throughout his F1 career. In the end, moving from Williams to McLaren was a nice move for Coulthard, and we think that the same could be said about our next protagonist. Let's talk about one of the biggest blunders in F1 team management, Williams letting Adrian Newey walk out the door in 1997. To understand why this was such a massive mistake, we need to dive into who Adrian Newey is and why he's so important in the world of Formula 1. Newey is basically the Messi or Ronaldo of F1 car design. He's the guy every team wants. His cars have won more championships than most teams have in their entire history. He's not just good, he's in a league of his own. We're talking about a man who's designed championship-winning cars for 3 different teams. That's unheard of in F1. Newey joined Williams in 1991 as their chief designer. Almost immediately, the team's fortunes turned around. From 1992 to 1997, Williams cars designed by Newey won 5 Constructors' Championships and 4 Drivers' Championships. They were the team to beat, and a lot of that was down to Newey's genius. But here's where things started to go wrong. By the mid-90s, despite all the success, Newey wasn't the top dog at Williams. Patrick Head, one of the team's founders, was still the technical director. Now, Head was a brilliant engineer in his own right, but Newey, being the ambitious guy he is, wanted that top spot. Williams, however, wouldn't budge. They lost the 1995 championship to Benetton, which didn't help the tension. Even when Williams won both titles in 1996, the writing was on the wall. Newey was ready to move on. McLaren saw their chance and pounced. They offered Newey the technical director role he craved. Williams tried to keep him, even put him on gardening leave, but it was too late. Newey joined McLaren in 1997. Now let's talk about the aftermath of this decision. Newey went to McLaren and immediately made an impact. In 1998, the McLaren MP413, Newey's first design for the team, dominated the season. Mika Hakkinen won the Drivers' Championship and McLaren took the Constructors' title. They repeated this success in 1999. But Newey wasn't done. In 2006, he moved to Red Bull, a team that had never won a race. Within a few years, he turned them into the dominant force in F1. From 2010 to 2013, Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel won 4 consecutive Drivers' and Constructors' Championships. And now they're dominating again with Max Verstappen. Meanwhile, what happened to Williams? Well, they never won another championship since Newey left. They had some good years, sure, but they gradually slipped down the grid. By the late 2010s, they were regularly finishing last in the Constructors' Championship. It's a far cry from their dominant days with Newey. In letting Newey go, Williams lost more than just a designer. They lost the key to their dominance, and their fortunes would never be the same again. It's a stark reminder of how teams rise and fall with the people behind them, and how a single management decision can alter history. Now, these incidents remind us that Formula One is as much about human decision making as it is about engineering and driving skill. Mistakes happen at all levels, from rookie drivers to seasoned champions, from pit crews to team management. While some of these errors had immediate consequences, others shaped the sport for years to come. These mistakes, while painful in the moment, are a reminder that Formula One isn't just about perfection, it's about the split-second decisions that shape careers, define legacies, and keep us on the edge of our seats. Now, this has been Racers Reverie, and we'll see you in the next one.